Plan to export illegal asylum seekers in the Central African state of Rwanda is a cruel, vindictive and inhumane policy. Home Secretary Priti Patel is well aware of the plan that it is expensive and unworkable, but is nevertheless a scheme that fits the racist mindset of most of the Conservative Party membership and MPs. The Tories believe that they not only need a hostile environment for migrants, but they need it to be clearly visible. That is the real meaning of this disgraceful gimmick. The policy is unworkable and it's apparent by the opposition, even at the point of some top civil servants in the Home Office. There was no evidence, Patel was told by them, that the plan would have any deterrent effect on illegal people smuggling, and therefore she was obliged to issue a rare ministerial direction, taking personal responsibility for it. Even some Tory MPs are opposed to the scheme. Former Minister Andrew Mitchell pointed out in a BBC interview that it would actually be cheaper to put each asylum seeker in the Ritz Hotel in London. Former Prime Minister and Home Secretary Theresa May also opposed the plan on the grounds of legality, practicality and efficacy, adding that the plan was apparently aimed at single men and asking, where is there evidence that this will not simply lead to an increase in the trafficking of women and children? But it is not enough to point to the unworkability and extortionate nature of the policy, as Keir Starmer has unfortunately done. Even if these things are true, it is a scandal that it took former leader Jeremy Corbyn to say what Keir Starmer had pointedly failed to say, that the policy is, by most people's standards of morality, and certainly by the standards of the Labour movement, simply wrong. Corbyn correctly described the policy as shameful and beyond cruel, and he called on the plans to be resisted as far as possible. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury didn't confine himself to whether the plan was workable or too expensive, thereby putting himself on the left of the Labour leader. When more than 160 charities and campaign groups wrote an open letter urging Patel to scrap them, they described the policy as shamefully cruel, not just unworkable or extortionate. Within all of the government departments overseen by Tory ministers, it is perhaps the Home Office immigration that conducts the most blatantly racist policies. When the Windrush scandal was in the news, there was one case revealed after another of Caribbean migrants who had settled and worked in the UK for decades, paying taxes, raising children and grandchildren, but who suddenly found themselves no longer eligible to settle in the UK. According to Human Rights Watch, the Rwandan ruling party continues to target those perceived as a threat to the government. Critics of the government have been harassed, threatened or arrested, and there have been disappearances and deaths of dissidents, for which the authorities regularly fail to conduct credible investigation. Fair trial standards, HRW says, are routinely flouted in many sensitive political cases. Most ominously for asylum seekers deported in the UK, the Rwandan government has a record of ill treatment for detention facilities. Arbitrary detention, ill treatment and torture in official and unofficial detention facilities is commonplace, the Human Rights Watch says. Like the US government outsourcing the torture of prisoners through extraordinary rendition, the British government is outsourcing its ill treatment of asylum seekers. The Labour movement has a completely different set of moral standards to the hard-nosed and corrupt demagogues in the Tory cabinet. It is always working class people who suffer the most from wars, as the current experience of Ukraine illustrates. Labour should have an open door policy for all those people who are desperate to try and escape the physical dangers of war and oppression, whether it is Ukraine, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, or anywhere else. The Labour Party should not allow the Tories to scapegoat asylum seekers and migrants for the problems of housing and education. The Tories, in the pockets of builders and developers, deliberately engineer housing shortages to keep prices and rents high. Labour could point to the money that the Tories threw at their pals on the failed test and trace system. That alone could have guaranteed everyone a decent home to live in if it was invested in social housing. It is the Labour movement, not the grinning hypocrites of the Tory party, who are the real custodians of a rich tradition of supporting working class people seeking refuge from war, hunger and oppression. That is our morality, and that has to be the starting point of our policies.